What's going on, y'all? Welcome into episode 64 of the Two Stripes podcast, the podcast that covers everything happening in the world of college football. My name is Colton Denning, and I am your host, hoping you're having a wonderful week and a warmer week than I am in this bomb cyclone out here in Boulder, Colorado. Anyways, welcome into today's show. I want to thank you all for listening, and this is going to be the continuation of our 2019 season previews. But before we get to that, I want to point you into the direction of where you can find the show, and that is on Apple Podcasts by searching the Two Stripes Podcast. It's on SoundCloud.com/TwoStripesPod, and it's on my YouTube channel, YouTube.com/Colton Denning. And if you go there, not only will you find the show, but you will find a treasure trove of college football highlights from players past and present, and some of the best to ever play college football. There's videos of Percy Harvin at Florida, Mike Williams from USC, one of my favorite college football players of all time, and a lot of classic Ohio State stuff. And then I've been doing players from smaller schools that are playing right now. So if you miss college football, youtube.com/Colton Denning. Get your fix in. Not only will you find the podcast there, but you will find a ton of college football player highlights, so be sure to check it out. With that out of the way, let's get into today's show. I love doing these season previews. I've done them for, I think, the last 2 or 3 seasons, and today's episode might be my favorite one I've ever done. Last week, I had the chance to speak with Paul Wiley, one of the editors over at StreakingTheLawn.com, about Virginia. And this is a program, if you haven't watched over the last 3 years, that has taken massive strides under head coach Bronco Mendenhall. He's really turned him around, and he's got a specific vision of what he wants that program to be. Of course, he had all those years of success at BYU, and then when he just got up and left, it was a bit of a surprise, especially going to a place so far across the country in Virginia. But just watching them grow over the past 3 seasons has been pretty remarkable. And they were 8-5 last year, capped the season with a shutout win over South Carolina in the bowl game. And they have a ton of positive momentum going forward. So it was fun to hear Paul's perspective on how the program can take the next step and what that is for Virginia and what Bronco Mendenhall can do. And we spent a lot of time talking about that and the need to finally beat Virginia Tech, which, if you don't know, Virginia has not done in a long time. But that is a lot of the key to this episode, is the importance of beating Virginia Tech and Virginia taking that next step as a program. So with that in mind, I think that's a fitting way to transition right into the interview. So here's Paul Wiley of Streaking the Lawn. I am so excited to be joined by one of the editors for the original guests of the Two Stripes podcast, Streaking the Lawn, and that is Paul Wiley. Paul, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Always glad to talk some Virginia football in the early days of March, just when it's on the middle of everyone's mind, I'm sure. Something to brighten up the days.
Absolutely. So the last time I did a Virginia episode was December 10th, 2016. And from then until now, a lot of things have changed. Virginia was coming off the first season under Bronco Mendenhall in 2016. They were 2-10. In 2017, they go 6-7. And then this year, 8-5. They shut out South Carolina in the Belk Bowl to end the season. What have the last 3 years been like? And before we really dive into, everything going on now and what the program looks like this spring, what's it been like watching the program grow and what Bronco Mendenhall and his staff have brought to the table?
It's been incredible. It's like watching, something develop from the mid 1800s to all of a sudden it's modern. I mean, the amount of modernization and sort of professionalizing that they're doing to different processes in the football program, whether that's recruiting, whether that's scouting that leads to recruiting, the work that's being done to develop and build a new football operations center. There is a tremendous amount that is changing in what seems throughout to be very intentional ways. That it's you can see the game plan and can tell that they are executing the plan that they have devised. And that, frankly, is what felt always missing from the previous coaching administration under Mike London, that it seemed more reactive. That played out. We saw it a lot with roster management. Our quarterback succession is the most glaring example that there just wasn't there weren't guys stacked up behind each other at the right years. So any kind of momentum that may have been developed from one season, you were starting over with an entirely, fresh set of guys the next year. So just overall, it's been good to see somebody look like they know what they're doing. As sad as that might sound to an outsider, but that's where, even if you were just setting the bar there, it's been a wild success.
Is that kind of just what Virginia fans have hoped for? I know that there are so many fan bases out there that as soon as they have a little bit of taste of success, it's like, okay, now we want to win 10 games a year. We want to win 12 games. We want to make a run at the conference championship and the playoff. For Virginia fans, is it just literally just like, hey, look like you know what you're doing, go to back-to-back bowl games, and they haven't been to back-to-back bowls since 2005, 2004, and it's not like the region is starving for talent at all. There's a lot of great players in that area.
Yeah.
What do Virginia fans want to see from their program?
I think you would obviously get different answers from different corners of the fan base, just like you would with anybody or any school. But I think there is a general consensus that we don't expect to be running with Clemson or Ohio State or Alabama like that. We're not looking at this as, we need our football program to be what our basketball program is. And some of this is the neighborhood we play in. That the ACC, the schools are generally smaller. There are more private schools. The stadiums are generally a little bit smaller. It is, while it's still obviously a Power 5 conference, it's not the SEC. It's not the Big Ten. Some of that is the nature of the institutions. That not many of our schools have 60,000 students. And just football is more segmented, I guess, or you've got that top tier that has the systemic advantages built in, and they've taken advantage of them and maximized what they can do at that level. But then there's a wide swath of schools, I think, in a footing somewhere like Virginia is, that can't play that kind of numbers game, don't have necessarily the same historic success to market oneself or to think about oneself as a program. So that's a very long way of saying that I don't think there's a whole bunch of expectation to be, we need to be in the playoff conversation every year. The goal that the coaching staff has set, and I think has been well received by the fan base, is we expect to compete for the conference championship. And that means finishing, as at or very near the top of our division every year and playing in the ACC championship game, going to bowl games every year, and beating Virginia Tech more often than we don't. Right now we're on a 15-year losing skid to Tech. That's really become the focus of the program now, because that is what is seen as the next step. That it is, there has been a measurable increase in other ways in, number of wins every year is the easiest metric, but getting to a bowl game and then winning a bowl game, now the next thing is beating Tech and getting ourselves back to being on that same sort of playing field in state.
Earlier on, you mentioned the inability to stack quarterbacks year after year, and this is my favorite subject when talking about Virginia, because I was a huge Kurt Benkert guy, just massive fan of the tatted up quarterback who wears the one arm sleeve and the visor and just lets it sling. And they lose him after 2017, but then Bryce Perkins comes in, And he was awesome. He was very efficient, completed 64% of his passes, almost 8 yards per attempt. I think that was like almost a full yard more than what Benkert was doing. Had a 25-9 touchdown interception ratio, and then he ran for over 900 yards and 9 touchdowns. What has it done to that offense to have a player like him, who wasn't really highly touted or regarded, coming from, a junior college, getting to Virginia, and he seemed like he really added another element to that offense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so he had done the 4-2-4 path that he had started at Arizona State and then played at Arizona Western, a junior college, and they played with East Mississippi, the Last Chance U school. They played them for the national title with Perkins under quarterback the year that he was there. But he brings the ability to run the offense that the coaches ran at BYU, that they were very, very open and upfront that we want to run X style offense. And we want a spread to run, true dual threat quarterback. And I think it was his first season on signing day when Mendenhall was talking about like what's the model of a Virginia quarterback. He coined the phrase Thorderback. They want a quarterback who's built like Thor, who looks like Thor. And so they have shown quarterback recruits clips of Taysom Hill, that they thought Taysom Hill was their guy. That was the perfect quarterback for their system at BYU. And Bryce Perkins can do so many of the same things. He's got an underrated arm, I think, that he is accurate and can throw deep pretty well. He is one of the top 5 fastest players on the team. There was a fairly raging debate in the preseason of whether Perkins might actually be the fastest. A freshman from Florida named Tavares Kelly put that to rest in pretty early in workouts. But last year he and Kyler Murray were the only players in the country with 2,400 passing yards and 800 rushing yards. So that's the level he was playing at for a school that hasn't had a dual threat quarterback since Aaron Brooks, or actually since current wide receivers coach Marcus Hagans. So it's been an incrediody change to see, this is what they want the offense to look like. That previously they were adjusting things to fit the personnel they had. Now they've been able to get the personnel they want, and they're able to change the system. And it's been really refreshing.
He also hurdled that dude from Louisville, which is pretty awesome. That was one of my favorite plays of
There's
the
also
year.
that.
And what's his next step as a senior? Because looking at the rest of the offense and just the skill positions, top rusher Jordan Ellis is gone. Top receiver Zacchaeus is gone as well. What's the biggest thing for them to find this offseason to help him grow as a senior? Because it seems like there's going to be a lot on his plate to really carry this offense, at least early on when they try to find, who these new playmakers are.
Yeah, absolutely. The story of the offense in 2019 is going to be the emergence of guys who have been sort of in the development system. We've had a fairly high level of success recruiting running backs. Lamont Atkins was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Virginia his senior year coming out of high school. He's kind of probably has pretty close to the a lock on being a starting running back. Virginia uses a lot of 2 running back sets, so saying starting running back, probably there's could be a couple of folks there. But it's finding, for Bryce, I think his next step is finding ways to distribute the ball quickly and efficiently to get speed in space. That's a lot of what Virginia has been recruiting at the wide receiver positions and at sort of H-back, slot back, whatever you want to call them, are players in the Olamide Zacchaeus mold. There's guys that are a little bit shorter, quick as a cat, really agile, and can burn you deep. The young man I mentioned earlier, Tavares Kelly, out of Florida, we've got a kid coming in this fall named Seneca Millage that is like 5'6", 5'7", but he ran the second fastest 100-meter dash of any high schooler in the country last year. So there's a definite emphasis on speed, and Bryce's ability to lead the offense. I think will actually be more about getting the ball out of his hands at the right time to let that speed do its thing.
You think that's the biggest question mark for the offense this year? Just because looking at it, they were 62nd in S&P Plus on offense, and really the only area that they really struggled at was in passing downs. They were 126 in S&P Plus. Do you think that that's like the most glaring thing? Is hey, we have to improve in that?
Yeah, I think so, and it's a matter of figuring out what your weapons are. That I think there was maybe a little bit of a limited number of weapons. That if somebody took Zacchaeus out of the game, somebody had a really good slot corner that could really shut down OZ. There wasn't a ton else in terms of options. Jesus Dubois had a good year. Joe Reed had a good year, both wide receivers. But there is it was kind of just the same 3 or 4 guys, and that's going to be how the passing game develops. Is frankly developing the tight end position. We used it sparingly last year, but effectively when it was used. There was several games that they would go to this great sort of package play with a stick route by the tight end and a swing route by Zacchaeus out to the edge. And basically whichever way the linebacker chose, they chose wrong. And there was, I think it was, can't remember which game now that I glowing about that offense, but it worked very effectively, and finding ways like that, it was a perfect example of make the right decision at the right time and get the ball to the right person.
So whenever you talk Bronco Mendenhall in Virginia, especially now, you got to talk defense, because that has been the staple of wherever he has been, is how tough and physical those defenses have played. And they did it last year. They finished 31st in defensive S&P Plus. How have they been able to mold that identity into what Mendenhall wants, and what do you envision their keys to success being this season?
Key to success this season is going to be the linebacking core, and that's actually, I think, the quintessential example of what the coaches have looked for and been able to go out and get. A guy named Charles Snowden is a 6'7". He's getting up to about 220, 225 outside linebacker. That when he came to Virginia, I think he'd only played a year or two of football. He was primarily a basketball guy. Came in, he was 40 pounds lighter, but he was just a rocket off the edge. And for his first year, basically just played that, put a hand to the dirt and just go get the quarterback. And now he's developed into a more well-rounded player that he can drop back in coverage. He plays really well up in the run game. And there are other players in the linebacking core like that. Elliott Brown on the other side is a sort of a similar mold. But the linebacking core is the heart of that defense. It's where the quarterback of the defense is. It's who gets everybody set up. And Mendenhall and Nick Howell, who's the sort of co-defensive coordinator, they work really well getting the linebackers to come at you from different angles. That maybe it'll be, an overload blitz one play and then an A-gap blitz the next. It's just, it is a very aggressive, very fast-paced defense that was able to have a fair amount of success last year, even being shorthanded. That there were a lot of injuries, especially on the defensive line, that by the end of the year, I think for the bowl game, it might have been for the bowl game, they only had 3 healthy, eligible defensive linemen. So thankfully, that's going to be an area that gets reinforced. We'll talk about how the recruiting has changed, I'm sure, but there's a 4-star Jawan Briggs coming out of Ohio, a top 2 or 3 defensive tackles in the country for last year's recruiting class, and he's going to probably come in and be expected to be pretty much an instant starter as both a talent injection, but just another healthy body for that group. So the linebacking core is what makes the ship go, but the defensive line is something that to watch out for, as Virginia's defense potentially being even better next year once they've got a full complement of guys on the line.
One of the most amazing things to me when talking about this defense was that you go back to 2017 and there were guys like Andrew Brown, Quinn Blanding, Micah Kaiser, who made like 3,000 tackles in his career. All those guys left. And I remember thinking, like, I know Mendenhall has this strong defensive background and, he's going to be able to get them to play solid and know what they're doing. But a bunch of new guys come in and they play really well. And now you lose guys like Juan Thornhill, Chris Peace. Who are some of the names that are going to step up along the defense and be able to keep it where it was last year?
Biggest name has got to be Bryce Hall. He was first team All ACC this past season, second team All American for Walter Camp, and I think maybe for the Football Writers Association as well, and was being rated as a first round pick. He's a tall, fairly long corner, and was being graded at sort of toward the end of the first round, but right after the bowl game announced he was coming back for his senior year. So having a guy who already has had that kind of success, he's already a proven commodity, who is hungry to come back to the program and really prove something, he's the guy to watch. And the fascinating thing is he was the lowest rated recruit in his signing class. He was a 2-star recruit coming out of high school, and has just absolutely taken over the defensive backfield and been a huge leader for that defense, certainly the last season, both in terms of his production, but also just how he interacted with the other guys.
You referenced recruiting a little bit, and I remember when Blanding and Brown were coming out of high school, there were two very highly touted kids. What's been the transition with the recruiting philosophy between the previous staff and Mendenhall now that we're a good almost 4 classes deep with this regime? What's kind of been the big difference, and what has he brought recruiting wise?
I think this is probably the area where the intentionality and the level of planning and you could almost call it micromanaging, but without the negative connotation. That they have very specific molds that they're looking for players. They have the coaching staff, just as a quick side note, has been great about sort of revealing a little bit more of their process. That I think that's how they've won some fans over, is by saying, look, trust us, because we're not going to give you all the details because we're not going to give away the family secret, but here's the plan. And this is what we're trying to do. Understand what we're trying to do so that what you see on the field, you'll understand how it matches up. But that's how they target specific types of wide receivers. Mendenhall actually created a software system for roster management that is marketed fairly broadly across college athletics. That it was born out of necessity at BYU, having to track, okay, we've got a kid that's committed in this class, but he's going on a 2-year mission, and then he's going to come back. We're going to have to redshirt him a year. And then, so when can we actually expect this guy to see the field? So this system is something that's moved with him and has been a big part of making sure they know we need, it's not just how many scholarships do we have available, but it's how many slot wide receivers do we need in the class of 2020? How many, 3 technique defensive linemen, how many defensive ends? Like it's a very ordered process. And as the on-field results have started to come, they've gotten a lot more buy-in from the kinds of kids that they want. That it has opened up the market a little bit on who's available and who might be on the board. And it's really starting to pay off. They've done really, really well out of state. The next hurdle is getting the same sort of traction in state. That in-state top talent doesn't really see Virginia as a legitimate option yet. And a lot of it has to do with the losing streak Tech. A lot of it, programs like Penn State have made really, really strong inroads into the Northern Virginia talent pool. And Virginia needs to continue establishing itself and proving it's not a fluke. It's not, 8 wins isn't the ceiling. 8 wins is going to be, sort of the expected minimum result moving forward. So I think once Virginia is able to beat Tech and have another couple of years of success under this staff, being able to bring in the guys and keep them home in Virginia is going to be the thing that's really what could take the program to the next level.
All right, we got to talk about Tech. We can't go through this whole episode without talking about
I know. I've brought it up. I've brought it up enough times. I know there's no way around it.
For reference for the listeners, I've always been a guy that has been like partial to Tech from the outside. I have to keep it honest here. But a couple years ago, my dad, in one of the Athlon preview magazines, there was a big profile on Bronco Mendenhall, and my dad just got like obsessed with it and him saying earned, not given, like all that stuff. And so like as a family, we've become big Virginia supporters. And so I think I watched almost every game last year, and I'm playing the world's smallest violin as an Ohio State fan and somebody that watches from the outside. I don't know if I've felt more of a gut punch during a loss for a team that I don't like actively root for than that game last year versus Virginia Tech. You said this is the thing for the program. Just for outsiders, like explain how big of a hump this is for them and the need to just get over this and to finally beat Virginia Tech, to slay that demon and to use that going forward as like, hey, look, this is real. We won 8 games. We shut out South Carolina in the bowl game. That's nice. But hey, we've reclaimed the state. We beat Virginia Tech. Like we're here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, and I think it is not just something that the fan base feels. That it has become a real like mission statement for the team. That there are videos of their off-season workouts over the last couple of weeks that they're doing push-ups, and every rep is beat Tech, beat Tech, beat Tech. That is how they are defining success for themselves, for the program in the immediate near future. But it really is. There are entire high school programs that, especially in the Tidewater area, the 757, the down around Norfolk and Virginia Beach and Hampton, that Virginia Tech made inroads there and got the benefit of coaching stability. That because Frank Beamer was there for so long, because Bud Foster's been there for so long, the relationships are deeper there. In addition to Tech having the advantage in recent on-field success, and it has made it difficult. The top recruits, even if their personal connection with the coaching staff is strong, even if they feel like, yeah, this might be the right place for me, they're going to hear a lot of, what the hell are you thinking? You're not going to Virginia. Like, Virginia's not where kids from, that's not where good talent goes. You're not going to Virginia. So that's something that UVA has definitely run up against with some of their top in-state targets, is guys that they want, guys that they like, guys that fit the system, and guys that like UVA all of a sudden go home and get pushback. And it's not necessarily from family. A lot of it's just from getting ragged on by kids at school. Like it's that serious a thing that Virginia is not a brand yet. Or it's not the right kind of brand. Unfortunately, it is a brand in a lot of those schools and a lot of those communities, but it's not the brand we want. So the ability to keep in-state talent home is the hallmark of any strong, consistent program over a number of years. And until Virginia beats Tech and really plants the flag of, we're back, until that happens, it's going to be very difficult to keep in-state talent in-state.
All right, final question for you here. What do you think a fair expectation is for Virginia next year?
I have tried to talk myself out of getting too optimistic. That there is a sort of Virginia fan reaction, and especially now as it's getting to be late March, mid to late March again, of that something bad can always happen. It's sort of a core ethos of the Virginia fan base. But next year's schedule sets up really, really well for Virginia. That it's a year in the ACC that there's a lot of transition. You have so many new coaches, especially in the Coastal Division. You got Georgia Tech, Miami, Carolina, Louisville, all have new coaches. So there's a kind of, it feels a little bit like there's an open field. There's an opening to make a run. And a bunch of Virginia's toughest games next year are at home. That they've got Virginia Tech at home, Florida State at home, Duke, which has played Virginia tough, but Virginia's kind of had their number, have them at home, and Pitt, Carolina, Miami, and Louisville on the road. And obviously Miami's going to be tough. There's a ton of talent there, but those other three programs are very much in a state of flux, and it sets up well for Virginia. And they've finally gotten the scheduling in a way that makes sense for a program that is at Virginia's level. There were years that we would go out and play Oregon at Oregon or play USC at USC. And then the next year that school would come back to us. So it's just teams that were, programs that were just so far ahead of us that a demoralizing, 60-point loss on national television to start the season really kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. But now our out-of-conference schedule is Old Dominion, it's Liberty, William and Mary is an FCS opponent to start the year. So it's the schedule sets up really, really well. And I have a hard time looking at it and not thinking 10 wins is a realistic possibility. Playing at Notre Dame would be a very tough game to win. And probably playing at Miami is the other one you've got to pencil in as a probable loss. And then the Virginia Tech game, of course, is until they do it, it's hard to say they're going to do it. But even if you say all three of those games are losses, it's still 9 wins if you're able to take care of business in the other ones, and maybe something breaks your way in one of those tougher games. So, I would say 8 wins would be a very realistic expectation. 9 wins would be a good year, and 10 wins is not an impossibility. It's not sort of beyond the realm of what's thinkable.
Yeah, those games against Miami on the road, at Notre Dame, and then even, Florida State, you're able to snag one of those. And if it's the Florida State game in that third game of the season, then the possibilities really are endless. And like you said, it's a fun schedule. It's not one that's going to beat them up in the early part of the season heading into ACC play. So I think from an outsider's view, this is the most intriguing Virginia season I can remember, and I can't wait to watch them get out and play. Their spring game is on April 27th, and then first game of the season, August 31st, on the road at Pitt. Man, we got a solid 25 minutes in there, and we probably could have gone an hour, I think, given the nature of this program and how everything's building up. I know I'm fired up just talking about it, but if you want to learn anything more about Virginia, not just Virginia football, Virginia basketball too, which I'm sure you have heard is pretty good. And hey, we're coming up on tournament time, man. I need to see it this year. I need to see it. But go to Streaking.
You and me both.
Go to streakingthelawn.com. Follow them on Twitter at STL_UVA. Catch all of Paul's work there. Just for a brief second on the basketball team. You remember how year after year Villanova would lose and people always had them in the Final Four or winning it? I know that's how it was when I was a kid. And then people stopped picking them, and then they finally won, and then they won again. I'm throwing it out there. I feel like this might be Virginia's year where everybody's like, they're going to lose again. Second round out. They finally do it. I hope to see it for you guys.
From your lips to God's ears, man.
Absolutely. And you can also listen to everything Streaking the Lawn does. Check out the Streaking the Lawn podcast. Is there anything you want to promote, Paul?
No, I think that was great plugging. I appreciate it. We certainly in basketball mode right now as a Virginia fan base, but gearing up for our sort of off-season analysis coverage and starting our football previews soon on the podcast as well. So
absolutely, check them out. And once again, Paul, want to thank you for joining, and hopefully we can talk down the road after Virginia beats Virginia Tech and makes it to the ACC championship game this year. We're going to speak it into the world.
Absolutely. All right, dude, let's go 2 for 2. Let's do it.
Thank you to Paul for joining the show. Shout out to all the Virginia fans, and I am wishing nothing but the best for your basketball team next week in the tournament. Rooting for you guys. I'll also be rooting for them come football season because Bryce Perkins is my guy, Bronco Mendenhall is my guy, and it's just fun to watch a program like that grow. And it was cool to get Paul's perspective on the challenges they face and how they're trying to build the program up and finally slay the beast that has been the Virginia Tech game for them. I'll obviously have an eye on them this season. I hope you will too. And be sure to check out streakingthelawn.com and all of the coverage they have STL_UVA on Twitter and the Streaking the Lawn podcast to keep up with everything Virginia. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did recording it and getting to learn more about Virginia. And if you did, please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts. Just search the Two Stripes Podcast and leave me some feedback. Leave a review. Tell me what I need to do to make the show better. And you can also correspond with me on Twitter at Dubsco. The show also lives on SoundCloud.com/TwoStripesPod and my favorite place, YouTube, YouTube.com/Colton Denning, where you'll find every episode of the show. But not only that, you'll find what I think, and I'm biased here, but what I think are the best college football highlights on the internet. I already told you that there's an almost 20-minute video of Percy Harvin up there, 12 minutes of Mike Williams at USC, Dwayne Jarrett, 16-minute video from USC, another dude who was just a monster wide receiver. There's also guys like Anthony Jennings at Alabama, Malcolm Jenkins, former Ohio State cornerback, Chris Gamble, former Ohio State cornerback, and then guys who are current or are just leaving college football. Lynn Bowden from Kentucky, Greg Dortch, the electric wide receiver from Wake Forest that Virginia fans probably know pretty well. So check it out. I'm not lying to you guys. It is a treasure trove, like I said in the intro. I think you will really enjoy it, and it will help get you through this last portion of the college football offseason before we really get into spring games and march closer to the 2019 season starting. So go check it out, youtube.com/Colton Denning. I promise you will enjoy it. Be on the lookout for another season preview episode next week. I already have it recorded in the bag. We're sticking in the ACC. I talked with the fine folks of FromTheRumbleSeat.com about Georgia Tech and everything involved with the transition between Coach Paul Johnson and Jeff Collins and what the Yellow Jackets are going to look like, not in that triple option system, and how Collins is bringing a lot of energy to that program. I had a hell of a time recording that one, so I think if you enjoyed this show, you'll enjoy next week's show. Until then, though, I want to thank you one last time for listening. My name is Colton Denning, and this is the Two Stripes Podcast.